Last July, Dr. David Kelly left his home for a walk in the Oxfordshire countryside, where he killed himself primarily by slitting his left wrist. That is the version of events accepted by Lord Hutton in his report into the government scientist's death, but one that's now being challenged by medical experts. The Oxfordshire coroner must decide next week whether to hold an inquest. Now, the government pathologist who held the post-mortem on Dr. Kelly has told us he agrees there should be a full inquest to clear the matter up. After all the political debate, our chief correspondent Alex Thompson reports now on the medical controversy around the scientist's death.
It will soon be 8 months since Dr. David Kelly died in the wood on Harrowdown Hill in Oxfordshire, and yet so many unanswered questions remain. Dr. Kelly's dental records went missing. Why? Mysterious detectives at the scene are unaccounted for. Who are they and why? His body had apparently been moved before examination. By whom? What for? A secret police operation codenamed Mason was mounted the day he died. What for? By whom? So far, Lord Hutton's inquiry has failed to answer these questions. Only a coroner's inquest could do so. But even the basic medical conclusions of Lord Hutton about his death are now under question. Lord Hutton concluded it was suicide.
And that the principal cause of death was bleeding from incised wounds to the left wrist, which Dr. Kelly inflicted on himself with the knife found beside his body.
But tonight, for the first time on television, some of Britain's leading medical specialists believe Hutton was wrong.
I'm John Scare. I'm a consultant vascular surgeon, and I also work as a medical expert.
He says it's just not possible to kill yourself by severing the small ulnar artery in one wrist, as Dr. Kelly did.
To bleed to death, you've got to lose about half your circulation, and that's just not possible through the ulnar artery alone.
Why not?
It's too small, and when you cut the ulnar artery retracts, and the bleeding stops. You may go on oozing a little bit of blood, but these people don't die.
Had Dr. Kelly bled to death, several pints of blood would have covered the scene. In fact, no sign of massive blood loss was present there. Pathologist Dr. Nicholas Hunt conducted the post-mortem at the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford. He says you can die from severing just the ulnar artery. Organs do not necessarily drain of blood. He also said Dr. Kelly spilled enough of his blood at the scene to die because he'd also taken a drug overdose and had a weak heart. Take all three with no signs of a struggle and a third party, and you have suicide.
I'm David Halpin. I'm a retired orthopaedic and trauma surgeon.
And David Halpin, too, is angry at Lord Hutton's suicide verdict. Studying the transcripts, he says the inquiry was far too superficial to reach such a verdict. Take that drug overdose, for instance.
Dr. Allen, who was a forensic scientist, 25 years experience, he said the levels of both the dextropropoxyphene and the paracetamol were about a third of what he regarded as a fatal level. But this is typical of this whole inquest, to be quite blunt, is that there are lots of questions which have not been asked and some that haven't been answered.
These are senior, experienced medical professionals. They're not wacky conspiracy theorists. They're not saying that Dr. David Kelly was murdered when he came here to this wood in Oxfordshire, but that serious and fundamental questions about his death have never been asked, let alone answered, and that the right and proper forum for getting those answers can only be a coroner's inquest. Go to Sheffield, though, and it's a different story. Here we found forensic experts, not medical practitioners, men with careers built upon piecing together and forming a whole picture of what happened. And what happened here was suicide, they say, but here too controversy.
Well, my name is Robert Forrest. I'm Professor of Forensic Toxicology at the University of Sheffield. I'm also Assistant Deputy Coroner in the jurisdiction of South Yorkshire.
And the Professor's here to tell you that the evidence given to Lord Hutton that the drug overdose was well below lethal level was misleading.
I would think that 29 tablets of coproximol would kill most people.
Including Dr. Kelly?
Including Dr. Kelly and including you and me. He could have died even if he hadn't slashed his wrist from the overdose, in my opinion, on the basis of the information that I have.
And the Professor of Forensic Pathology here says doctors who don't believe David Kelly could have killed himself are fantasists.
I'm Professor Chris Milroy. I'm Professor of Forensic Pathology at the University of Sheffield.
And he says the sceptics are refusing to look at everything in the whole. No signs of a struggle and a dangerous overdose.
If you add that to someone who's clearly bleeding from his wrists and also has heart disease, and this is a drug that has a direct toxic effect on the heart in overdosage, there is more than enough pathology to account for the self-destruction of Dr. Kelly.
The debate continues, and all sides, though, appear to agree on one thing. The only way to settle it is in Oxford, for the Oxfordshire coroner, Nicholas Gardiner, to reopen a full inquest.
I feel that this man was treated disgracefully by some of the people in power in this country, and I think the least that should happen for Dr. Kelly, who was a servant, a public servant, and his family, and I think the nation too, is that the inquest should be reopened, a jury should be called, and there should be the most scrupulous examination as to the cause of his death.
We went to the Inns of Court in London, where you can find a doctor who is also a coroner, who is also a QC.
I'm Dr. Michael Powers. I'm a Queen's Counsel interested in coroner's law and medical law generally.
The Oxfordshire coroner was forced to adjourn his inquest for the Hutton inquiry. Dr. Powers says the exceptional reasons necessary for him to reopen it in law now exist.
In brief, they are because expert evidence from people of consultant status, without any axe to grind, simply wanting to have a better and fuller explanation and exploration of the circumstances, he should recognize that and appreciate that the issues do need to be more fully explored.
And that amounts to the criterion of exceptional circumstances?
Yes.
They don't agree that it's exceptional in Sheffield, but they still think that an inquest might be prudent.
Just the point of investigating how Dr. Kelly came to his death, the means by which he came to his death, I think the coroner was probably better equipped, would be better equipped, than, with the greatest of respect, Lord Hutton was.
In view of the, if you like, the hairs that have been set running by some people, then a coroner's inquest would allow the evidence to be aired again and an appropriate conclusion made. I would be surprised, to say the least, if a conclusion was drawn that another party was involved in Kelly's death.
And late this afternoon, Dr. Hunt, the pathologist who led Lord Hutton to his suicide verdict, contacted Channel 4 News. He said he too would be more comfortable with a full inquest than simply the Hutton verdict. So it is that on March the 16th in Oxford, the coroner will hear from properly interested parties. He will then decide whether one of the most politically charged inquests in decades will or will not reopen.
Alex Thompson in Oxford.